I'm John McKee, editor of Messianic Apologetics. Messianicapologetics.net. And I would like to welcome you to this episode of Messianic Insider, your theology and news roundup for May the 16th, 2025. There are a lot of things happening right now. We know that President Trump is finishing up his Middle Eastern visit. We think he's on the way back home to the U.S. now. New developments in the Israel-Hamas conflict, a lot of speculation about the Abraham Accords, and the ongoing questions of Russia and Ukraine, as well as a very significant piece which, of course, hit the news cycles yesterday. What are we going to do about 8647? So we have a lot to discuss, and we always do the theology roundup first because the news roundup is time sensitive. And all of the links, all the stories which I am going through, you should be able to access these once this episode is archived on Messianicapologetics.net. All the links will be available, and you can go in and access them yourself. All right, our theology roundup. And I'm going to be reading through an excerpt from one of our books, so I don't unnecessarily leave out any details. What are we as Bible readers, as those who want to have a Torah foundation in our theology, what do we do with the issue of slavery in the Bible? This is one of those areas where a lot of people, it doesn't matter who you are. Oh, you believe in the ongoing validity of the law of Moses. Okay, do you have any slaves? And some of the handling of this issue has been pretty substandard over the years. I believe, as I hope many of you do as well, that an issue like slavery, when encountered in the Torah, what the ancient Israelites were to do with their slaves, that's an issue which has to be looked at within the scope of God's plan of salvation history. And what did these instructions first mean to the ancient Israelites? An important resource available from our ministry, we've had it since 2013, it was updated earlier this year, is the Messianic Torah Helper. You can get this at outreachisraelbookstore.com. And this deals with a lot of these kinds of issues. What do you do with ancient perspectives on the Torah? How do you sort through some of the ethical and moral controversies of the Torah? What does it mean to observe God's instruction in the post-resurrection era, subsequent to the death, burial, and resurrection of Yeshua the Messiah? So this is a resource which I recommend people access after going through our flagship book, The New Testament Validates Torah, because some people need a framework for understanding, what do you do with these kinds of issues, among other things. Now, within the Messianic Torah Helper is a chapter entitled, and I've got to switch share screens here. Oop. We'll get this in just a moment. All right. Technical issues. This is kind of upsetting and a little embarrassing even. All right, there we go. Sorry about that. Excuse me. There is a chapter entitled Addressing the Frequently Avoided Issues Messianics Encounter in the Torah. And this deals with a number of matters where having some kind of an ancient Israelite, ancient Near Eastern perspective first is important. And this would definitely involve a topic like slavery. You know, this is where we have to recognize how the scriptures were not written to us, but they are certainly for us. The most significant event of the entire Torah is the exodus of ancient Israel from Egypt and the deliverance of the Israelites from their servitude to Pharaoh. Moses admonished the people in Exodus 13:3, "Remember this day in which you went out from Egypt, from the house of slavery, for by a powerful hand the Lord brought you out from this place." New American Standard. There is no doubting the fact that ancient Israel was removed mebeit avadim, or from the house of slavery. The Ten Commandments themselves open up with the declaration, "I am the Lord your God who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of slavery." Exodus 20 verse 2, New American Standard. Also Deuteronomy 5:6. If the main feature of the Exodus was liberation from bondage and the utter humiliation of the 15th or 13th century BCE superpower by the removal of its workforce, then why do Bible readers see legislation in the Pentateuch regulating the practice of slavery? What do we do with slavery as interpreters who live in the 21st century, where such a practice is viewed as utterly abhorrent? Immediately after the Ten Commandments were delivered in Exodus 20, Exodus 21, 1 through 6, listed a series of regulations regarding an Eved Ivri, or a Hebrew slave, which could be viewed as somewhat antithetical to the whole message of Israel being removed from Egyptian bondage. This is a significant area of difficulty for Messianics, especially when various Torah teachers may forcibly assert that all of the Torah can be followed today. Such people either make the mistake of having to allegorize or spiritualize commandments regarding slavery, regulating slavery, forgetting their ancient context, or make the even worse mistake of acting like these things do not appear in the biblical narrative. Any objective reader of the Torah cannot avoid the fact that slavery is a part of the Bible's story and that commandments regarding slavery were given to ancient Israel. What are we to do with them today? It must be observed that there is no specific differentiation in the Hebrew between what in English we could call a slave or a servant. The Hebrew Eved means both slave and servant, from the Holiday Lexicon. Likewise, the Greek doulos, often used to render Eved in the Septuagint, and whose usage carries over into the apostolic scriptures, means a born bondman or slave, the Liddell Scott Lexicon. Some English translations, like the New American Standard, provide the rendering bondservant for either Eved or doulos in some locations, but the source vocabulary in either Hebrew or Greek does not provide a specific term which would substantiate something beyond slave or servant. Any kind of slavery or servanthood regulated in the Tanakh primarily concerned ancient Israel functioning in an ancient Near Eastern economic system. The Torah's commandments regarding slavery can most often be divided into categories regarding debt bondage and manumission. Exodus 21, Leviticus 25, Deuteronomy 15. whereas a great deal of slavery in the surrounding cultures, primarily of Mesopotamia and Egypt, was focused around the people of those societies being the subjects of a deity monarch. The ancient Mesopotamian creation story, Atrahasis, depicts humanity being created by the gods, specifically so that they could serve as slaves, when set against the biblical creation account where humanity was made to commune with God in a garden planted by him, Genesis 3:8. While even a slavery for repayment of debt may have never been something desirable, the rules for such slavery, as seen in the Torah, did afford the slave considerable rights. When one reviews the Torah instructions regarding slavery, one sees that male and female slaves within Israel were expected to participate in the Passover, Genesis 17:13, Exodus 12:44, to rest on the Sabbath, Exodus 20, verse 10, Deuteronomy 5:14, to live wherever they pleased, Deuteronomy 23:15 through 16, and severe penalties were placed upon masters who abused their slaves, Exodus 21, verses 20 through 27. G.H. Haas notes, quote, Israelites who must sell themselves into bond service because of personal impoverishment or inability to pay a debt or fine are not permitted to be treated like foreign slaves. They may not be sold as chattel slaves to other masters. Their time of service to fellow Israelites is limited to 6 years, and to resident aliens, it is limited to the Jubilee year, unquote. From the Dictionary of the Old Testament Pentateuch. This kind of slavery is what was witnessed in Exodus 21, 1 through 6, specifically in what is often termed the law of the bondservant. A Hebrew slave was only allowed to sell himself into service for a maximum of up to 6 years, Exodus 21:2, and had to leave the master's care with adequate provision, Deuteronomy 15:12 through 15. If he went into servitude with his wife, he and his wife were to leave together, Exodus 21:3. However, should the slave's master provide him with a wife resulting in children, such a wife and children could not leave the master's house with him, Exodus 21:4. What this would do in many cases is create a permanent bond between the slave and his master's household, as Exodus 21:5 records a slave saying, I love my master, my wife, and my children. I will not go out as a free man, New American Standard. The male slave could take a physical mark on his ear designating his permanent bond to his master's house, Exodus 21:6. The reason for allowing a male slave to be permanently bonded to his master's house is a clear, if obvious one, when this regulation is set against its ancient Near Eastern context. Nahum Amsarna indicates in his Exodus commentary, quote, in the ancient Near East, it was common practice for a master to mate a slave with a foreign bondwoman for the purpose of siring houseborn slaves. In such instances, no matrimonial or emotional bond was necessarily involved, and the woman and her offspring remained the property of the master, unquote. Allowing a slave to willingly be bonded to his master's house was a safeguard so that the master would never treat the wife he provided and the children sired as some kind of expendable property. If a slave showed love, the Hebrew verb ahev, toward his master, wanting to become a permanent member of his household, by necessity, the master would have to show some respect and care for his family who would now be bonded to him. While this is difficult for many people in the 21st century to understand, Bible readers have to put themselves back into ancient times. Selling oneself into bondage was the only way for some to exit financial straits. This is where the Pentateuch paralleled contemporary law codes of its period, as the Code of Hammurabi from almost 1,000 years earlier had allowed for something similar. If a man incurs a debt and sells his wife, son, or daughter for money, or binds them out to forced labor, 3 years shall they work in the house of their taskmaster. In the 4th year they shall be set free. Section 117. Peter ends, may remind us, quote, the point of the law in Exodus is not to question the existence of this social condition, but to give clear guidelines for how people in such a condition must be treated, unquote. While in Hammurabi's code, the period of servitude is shorter, the stipulation in the Torah is that when such a slave was let go, the master shall furnish him liberally from your flock and from your threshing floor and from your wine vat. You shall give to him as the Lord your God has blessed you. Deuteronomy 15:14, New American Standard. The significance of the Exodus 21 instruction being delivered right after the occurrence of the deliverance from Egypt was for the ancient Israelites to never treat such slaves having to sell themselves to pay off debts the way which they were treated harshly and unfairly by the Egyptians. Here, Bible readers see a direct example of the Torah instructing ancient Israel in its ancient world. And it is safe to say that the Exodus 21, 1 through 6 commandments classify as casuistic law applying to a specific situation and not for all times. So some of you all know the similarity and difference between apodictic law and case law. Apodictic law are the things which are immutable for all times, things like thou shalt not, whereas case law affects things which were limited to various situations, particularly situations within ancient Israel. Excuse me. Some Christian and Messianic interpreters have tried to allegorize Exodus 21, 1 through 6 as believers, now relating to Yeshua the Messiah as his bondservants, per varied references to the apostles serving as douloi of the Lord. This view runs into a problem because of the verses immediately following in Exodus 21, 7 through 11, which begin with the instruction, if a man sells his daughter as a female slave, she is not to go free as the male slaves do. New American Standard. It is fairly difficult to spiritualize or allegorize these verses, absolutely requiring us to place them in their ancient context. The apostles' service as the douloi or avadim of the Lord was not a connection to Exodus 21, 1 through 6, but rather their association to the previous avadim of the Lord who had preceded them, such as Moses and the prophets, indicating how serious their authority from God actually was. Just like the man having to sell himself into slavery to pay debts, a father in ancient Israel had the right to sell his daughter to a family. Exodus 21:7. Presumably because the family was destitute and did not possess the resources to provide for the daughter's well-being. As Walter C. Kaiser is clear to point out, quote, this pericope pertains to a girl who was sold by her father, not for slavery, but for marriage, unquote. Such a female, if displeasing in the eyes of her master, had to be let go, redeemed. He does not have authority to sell her to a foreign people because of his unfairness to her. Exodus 21:8, New American Standard. Such a female was to be treated as a fellow daughter, should the master designate her as a wife for his son. Exodus 21:9, with the stipulation, as Sarna indicates, quote, she would normally be protected from sexual abuse, unquote. And should the master choose another woman instead of her as his wife, she was not to be denied life essentials. Exodus 21:10. If the master failed to uphold the terms of the female being sold to him by refusing to marry her, refusing to give her to his son, or refusing her to be redeemed, then she could go away without having to pay him anything. Exodus 21:11. Perhaps the closest parallel we see in more modern times would be the practice of arranged marriages adhered to in many cultures, where marriages between families had more to do with the maintenance of property and or strategic alliances than romantic love. This does not mean that love is a factor which is totally absent, think Queen Victoria and Prince Albert, but love may not be the immediate motivation. Some sectors of European royalty can easily come to mind, particularly in the close relationship of royals from the weak German states historically having a link with the British crown by providing Protestant royal spouses for princes and princesses. Likewise, consider the role of a nanny or a tutor being permanently connected to aristocratic and or well-to-do families as part of the extended household. Exodus 21, 7 through 11 is best thought of in this kind of context. Today, however, due to the advances in economy in the Western world, Exodus 21, 7 through 11 has few parallels due to the ease of getting a paying job and welfare programs offered by the state. People do not often have to be married out to ensure their well-being. Nevertheless, the Torah's instructions seen in Exodus 21, 1 through 11 about slavery did have some differences when compared to other law codes of the same period. There is no indication in the Torah that slavery was to be encouraged as a permanent practice for ancient Israel. It was simply regulated as a practice which existed, having been available to those one step below utter poverty. So, we should by no means be surprised, especially with the emphasis of equality for all seen in the apostolic scriptures, Galatians 3:28, Colossians 3:11, that for the first believers in Yeshua, slavery was a practice which was on the way out. In fact, speaking about a generation before Yeshua, the great sage Rabbi Hillel said, lots of slave girls, lots of lust, lots of slave boys, lots of robbery. Mishnah Avot 2:7. Largely negative words on the practice. Such sentiments no doubt affected the Apostle Paul, having been a member of the school of Hillel. Acts 22, verse 3. By the apostolic era, the ancient economy of banking had improved so that it was much easier for people to acquire jobs in the more cosmopolitan sense of the word, even though some would be closely attached to various households as servants. While some Jews during the time of Yeshua owned slaves in the first centuries BCE and CE, by no means did slaves ever become the kind of force like they were for the ancient Egyptians, as they served much more menial functions. The New Testament reflects a rather progressive view when it regards believers in Yeshua owning slaves and does not encourage believers to own other believers. Slaves who believed in Yeshua were not to be disobedient to their masters who did not believe, but they were to demonstrate proper character because of their faith. Ephesians 6:5, Colossians 3:22, 1 Timothy 6:1. The Messianic writings do envision the day when members of the community of believers in Yeshua would never have to sell themselves into servitude. Instead, all are to be treated as fellow brothers and sisters, and the ecclesia is to provide for the needs of the destitute. Acts 2:45 attests that the first believers sold their possessions and goods and distributed them to all, as any had need. Paul's instruction to Philemon regarding the runaway slave Onesimus was, perhaps he was for this reason separated from you for a while, that you would have him back forever, no longer as a slave, but more than a slave, a beloved brother, especially to me, but how much more to you, both in the flesh and in the Lord. Philemon 15 and 16. Both references New American Standard. The New Testament undeniably sees the time when all human beings will be emancipated. 1 Corinthians 7:21. And any Messianic today who would argue that slavery is a practice still to be followed, seeking justification from the Torah to do so, is taking the Torah out of its ancient context and is forgetting the trajectory of the scriptures back to the equal status of all human beings as seen in Eden. The Pentateuchal laws of slavery can actually teach us some important things about how radical the Torah was for the ancient Israelites to follow when compared against the law codes of some of their neighbors. It can teach us important things about the character of God, as well as a steady plan to restore humanity back to its original condition. But such Torah commandments regarding slavery were very clearly case laws which were given for a different time and a different economic environment, and they cannot be followed today. Other than deriving principles on the great respect the Torah shows for others in low social straits, the Messianic movement must stand with the halakha of today's Jewish synagogue, whereby these commandments cannot be followed in the economy of the modern world. I do realize that was a teaching a little longer than we are used to on this new format of Messianic Insider, but this is an important topic which does come up. And I suspect that we're going to be having more of these elongated teachings on perhaps our Friday episodes of Messianic Insider as we look toward the weekend. And once again, this is something which has been excerpted from our ministry publication, the Messianic Torah Helper, which you can access at outreachisraelbookstore.com. All right, now we do have a lot of news to go through, and things are getting very tense right now between Israel and Hamas. President Trump has just concluded a major visit to the Middle East, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and then the United Arab Emirates. There's a lot of talk right now about the expansion of the Abraham Accords. Of course, what's going to happen between apparent negotiations between Russia and Ukraine. A lot's happening. And what happened yesterday with James Comey, the former FBI director, posting something on social media with 8647. That's gotten a lot of talk right now. So there are a lot of things we need to be paying attention to, and definitely a lot of things we need to be praying about before the Lord. All right, so let's get started on our news roundup, and all these links are going to be available for you to sort through when this episode is archived at messianicapologetics.net. From open source intel yesterday, 15th of May, this is Trump when he was in Abu Dhabi. Will be leaving tomorrow, destination unknown, although probably going back to Washington. So there's a lot of talk, is Donald Trump going to be going to the peace summit between Russia and Ukraine? Is he going to join one of the, there's an Arab summit that's going to be held over the weekend in Baghdad. Is he going to go someplace else? Is this statement about we'll be leaving tomorrow, destination unknown, is that to be taken more as a metaphor regarding the future, which has started consequent of this Middle East trip? We just have to wait and see. Also from open source intel yesterday, May the 15th, Trump, I have concepts for Gaza that I think are very good. Make it a freedom zone. Let the United States get involved and make it just a freedom zone, the U.S. leader said in Qatar. He added, I'd be proud to have the United States have it, take it, make it a freedom zone. What's going to happen to Gaza? And Time headlines. Trump suggests that the U.S. should take Gaza and turn it into a freedom zone. During a business roundtable in Qatar on Thursday, President Donald Trump once again suggested a U.S. takeover of Gaza as a way of attempting to redevelop the Palestinian territory. Hey, there are all kinds of things being thrown out about what are we going to do with Gaza? How are we going to redevelop this? How are we going to see peace restored to the region? How much of this is Trump throwing ideas up against the wall and seeing what the different Arab states surrounding are going to do, we don't know. And of course, this begs a lot of speculation on the part of many. Well, is Donald Trump paving the way for the arrival of the beast? Or maybe he is the beast. From the New York Post yesterday, May the 15th. President Donald Trump said on Thursday that the United States was getting very close to securing a nuclear deal with Iran, and Tehran had sort of agreed to the terms. So we got that situation we've got to monitor. What's going to happen regarding the Iranians and their nuclear intentions. All right, from Charisma. This is also yesterday, May the 15th. And I'm going to interject. These are all stories which I start collecting after Messianic Insider. So these are things I encountered after yesterday's episode. Did a historic Middle East meeting just fulfill Bible prophecy? Okay, people are talking about prophecy. No big deal there. We monitor things because yes, we believe that the Messianic movement is the end-time move of God. Yes, we also believe it has an important role to play in the end times. And along with that we need to know what people are saying, because whether we like it or not, there are a lot of people in today's Messianic community who are talking about this, and there are not enough Messianic leaders and teachers who are willing to acknowledge the discussion and at least say, hey, we're watching this and we're watching that. So that's what we're here to do. Now, in this article, and you can read through this, even though the title is, did a historic Middle East meeting just fulfill Bible prophecy? Speaking of Donald Trump's visit to the Middle East, there are no specific prophecies mentioned. It does mention how Saudi Arabia is taking on a new relationship with the United States. And it also interjects how unexpected partnerships are likely to come. Okay, this is from yesterday, May the 15th, from Caitlin Collins' channel on X. She's not my favorite journalist, but we're here to monitor what people are saying. General Stanley McChrystal, retired four-star general, on President Trump's overture to Syria and whether they will normalize relations with Israel. Yeah, I actually think it's possible. I think the Mideast is in a period in which the tectonic plates are mobile now. So you can watch the whole clip of Caitlin Collins on CNN. But yeah, there's a lot of talk, especially since the new Syrian president met with Trump in Saudi Arabia with the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia right there. Are they going to come into the Abraham Accords and normalize relations with Israel? What's going to happen? And what things are going to be recalibrated from a lot of our expectations regarding eschatology, the Daniel 9:27 peace treaty, because of the political realities? And how many things are we subconsciously holding on to from the influence of dispensationalism in the second half of the 20th century and into the 21st century, which are not all wrong, but are not all right either? That's going to be interesting. All right, so we're going to change the subject ever so slightly. I thought this was interesting. This is from a pastor's channel on X. Some ministries will encourage all kinds of AI use for preaching and Bible studies, but will draw the line with AI-generated music. Same with video preaching. Pipe in the preaching, but the music must be performed live. How many people are getting their Bible teaching or are writing things with the assistance of AI? Now, I'm not necessarily talking about people who record something with their voice and then AI transcribes it. Some of the articles that our ministry has released, they come from podcasts. They come from things which have been delivered in person or been recorded, and then they're edited, although they have to be edited by a human, by me. But people are generating Bible teaching content solely by AI. when this episode concludes, this episode of Messianic Insider concludes, StreamYard has the option of having its AI break up certain shorts, which can then be posted to social media and then link to the larger episode. But that is not having a computer generate the content. That's having a computer edit the content. But yeah, there are a lot of questions regarding AI, artificial intelligence, Bible teaching, pastoring even, which are uncomfortable and actually even disturbing. This is from the X channel, African Hub, and I always pay attention to anything involving Burkina Faso, the former Upper Volta, formerly a part of the French Empire. And the reason is because there was someone attending my local Messianic congregation a number of years ago, also attending Dallas Baptist University, who was a pastor who was from Burkina Faso. And he, yes, he did speak French. So it's not a country many of us in the West pay attention to because it is very poor. But here you have President Ibrahim Traore, I hope I pronounced that properly, has plans to unite Africa into the United States of Africa. And he recently attended the big victory parade in Moscow. So he is aligning his country away from Western Europe, away from the United States, toward Moscow, toward the east. Is there going to be a United States of Africa or not? Global tectonic plates are shifting. That's what General McChrystal said. From open source intel, yesterday, May the 15th, Steve Witkoff, President Trump's Middle East envoy, told Breitbart News that 4 to 6 countries, including Azerbaijan, Armenia, Syria, and Lebanon, may join alongside Saudi Arabia and others in the Abraham Accords in the coming months. So that's certainly something to be paying attention to. All right, so this is a clip from Fox News yesterday, May the 15th. Fox's Brett Baer leads off special report with breaking news that President Trump says the U.S. and Iran are getting close to agreeing to terms on a nuclear deal, with a live report from Peter Doocy. So you can watch this whole clip later. But yeah, there's a lot of talk about the Middle East right now. Abraham Accords, deals with Iran. What else? Gaza. All right, so this is the big story from yesterday, and there are a lot of other developments in this today. So this was the first story that hit my social media feed from Breitbart. Former FBI Director James Comey deletes Instagram post saying to 8647. Now, what does 8647 mean? 8647, 86 in a lot of professional code out there means to end something. And then, of course, 47, President Trump is the 47th president. Former FBI Director James Comey deleted an Instagram post that called to 8647, which some interpreted as a violent threat against POTUS President Trump. Comey shared a photo of a shell formation on the beach appearing as 8647, 86 possibly meaning eliminate, and 47 potentially meaning President Trump. While the phrase 86 does not inherently mean violence, it allegedly originated as a restaurant term. People immediately criticized the post for tangentially implying violence, and Comey deleted it as a result. So, yeah, there's a lot of talk right now about this and how smart this really was. Because, yes, there are things out there which apparently said 8646, referring to the previous president. What are people going to do with 8647? From Nio Berg's channel on X, Operation Gideon's Chariot has begun. Israel is destroying Gaza from land, sea, and air. The goal now is to control Gaza forever, even after the hostages are back. Time's up. Well, this is a development. We'll continue to wait and see what happens. Here's a sad story I saw yesterday, and it was from the 007 channel on Instagram. We're really sad to hear of the passing of Joe Don Baker at the age of 89. The Texan actor played villain Brad Whitaker in The Living Daylights and CIA agent Jack Wade in GoldenEye and Tomorrow Never Dies. He was a character actor who we probably remember from a lot of things. Yeah, sorry to hear that. I remember going to see both GoldenEye and Tomorrow Never Dies at the theater. So that's why this really hit me. All right, here's a video you all need to watch. It's from the Instagram channel Honest Reporting. Jews are indigenous, period. We sat down with Scottish Jewish author Ben M. Freeman, whose new book explores the deep-rooted connection between the Jewish people and their ancestral homeland, Israel. This isn't colonialism. It's the story of an indigenous people returning home after centuries of exile. So watch this clip, and then you may want to look into some more of his information because, of course, right now, post October the 7th and the rise of anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism, there are a lot of claims that the Jewish people, the Israelis, they're not indigenous to the Holy Land. This is something which dismisses that as complete bunk. Okay, two more stories from open source intel. Yesterday, Iranian President Masoud Pezeshkian, if I pronounce that properly, responded to Trump's Gulf tour remarks saying, "We will not bow to any bully." He added, he thinks he can come here, chant slogans, and scare us. For us, martyrdom is far sweeter than dying in bed. At the GCC summit in Riyadh, Trump said he's open to a deal with Iran, but warned it must stop sponsoring terror, halt its bloody proxy wars, and permanently and verifiably cease its pursuit of nuclear weapons. So how close are we going to get to some kind of a conflict with the Iranians and their nuclear aspirations? Okay, and then finally, and this was from late last night. So there you see the Seashells 8647 posted by James Comey. James Comey, I posted earlier a picture of some shells I saw today on a beach walk, which I assumed were a political message. I didn't realize some folks associate those numbers with violence. It never occurred to me, but I oppose violence of any kind, so I took the post down. And here's the commentary. So you're saying you're the former FBI chief and you didn't know. And this is something which, this is not going to end up well. And I did see President Trump being interviewed, and he takes it, I mean, he said he takes it as a sign of potential endorsement of him being assassinated. So yeah, this we live in some very tense times. We live in some times where we've got to be paying attention. And indeed, how many of you at your Messianic congregation or fellowship, you just remain oblivious on Shabbat to some of the things taking place in our world? It doesn't mean we have to read end-time prophecy into current events. We shouldn't be doing that. That's irresponsible. But do you pray for the peace of Jerusalem, Israel, your native country, in my case, the United States? Do you pray for the peace of the world? And do you pray for God to demonstrate his mercy and for the truth to come out? Those are some things I think we can all agree we need to be focusing on this weekend, because there continue to be questions out there which remain unanswered, whether it's the Middle East, Israel, Hamas, Russia, Ukraine, Iran, and even things going on now with 8647. As always, on behalf of Outreach Israel Ministries and Messianic Apologetics, I would like to sincerely thank you for your ongoing prayers, encouragement, and donations toward all of our ministry efforts. You can give online at outreachisrael.net/support. I wish you a Shabbat Shalom, a restful weekend, and we'll see you on Monday with another episode of Messianic Insider. Shalom and take care.